At 12:47 a.m., a rookie nurse pressed 2 fingers to a soldier's shoulder and felt something the surgeon swore wasn't there. They'd signed the chart, declared him stable, case closed. But his breathing hitched like a warning shot, and beneath the gauze was a hardness that didn't belong in living tissue. Here's the question that should haunt anyone who's ever been told to stay in their lane. When the people above you are wrong, do you stay silent and live with it, or speak up and lose everything? This story isn't just about a missed fragment. It's about how power rewrites truth, how courage leaves receipts, and what happens when 3 U.S. generals walk into a civilian hospital demanding names. Stay with me to the final minute, then hit like and tell me where you're watching from. 12:47 a.m. was only a number on the wall clock. It did not explain the way Emma Wade's fingertips had gone cold against gauze, or why a sedated soldier's breathing had sharpened like a blade the second she touched his shoulder. The room looked calm, clean controlled. It was the kind of calm hospitals sold to families in quiet voices. Stable, resting, monitored. Earlier, it had been anything but. Rain had been falling over Fayetteville in a steady, impatient sheet, turning the streetlights outside Piedmont Sentinel Medical Center into long, watery smears. The ambulance bay glistened under floodlights, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and diesel, and the sharp bite of disinfectant that drifted out every time the automatic doors parted. Inside, the emergency department ran on its own weather. Phones rang. Wheels squealed. A monitor alarm somewhere pitched high and then cut off as quickly as it began, like someone clamping a hand over a mouth. Emma stood at the edge of the nurse's station with a paper cup of coffee she had already reheated once. The lid was loose and the cardboard sleeve had softened from her grip. She did not feel tired in the normal way. She felt hollowed out. 3 weeks as a registered nurse in the hospital still felt like a language she spoke with an accent. She knew the words, she knew the rules, but everything moved too fast for comfort. Every shift she learned how much she did not know. Her badge hung from her scrubs, the plastic still too clear, the photo still too new. Emma Wade, RN. Underneath, in smaller letters, the hospital logo and the unit assignment. Trauma and emergency. She had asked for it. She had said she wanted the hard cases, the high stakes, the place where decisions mattered. She had pictured herself steady and capable, the kind of nurse who could stand in chaos without shrinking. Tonight, she had already spilled saline across a counter and apologized 3 times to a respiratory therapist who did not look up from his work. She had corrected a medication label after checking it twice, then checked it a 3rd time anyway because her stomach would not unclench until she did. She had watched a family cry at the end of a hallway and kept walking because there had been a blood draw to do and a bed to turn over, and the hospital did not stop for grief. The overhead speaker crackled, then came the voice that made every head turn without thinking. Incoming trauma. Gunshot wound. Male, mid-20s, military. Vitals unstable. 4 minutes out. The nurse beside Emma, a woman named Tasha, who had worked trauma long enough to look bored by it, set her pen down and pushed her chair back. "Here we go," Tasha said not unkindly. Emma's pulse jumped. She set the coffee down and followed Tasha toward the trauma bay. Her shoes stuck slightly to the floor in places where the cleaning crew had not yet dried the tiles. The hospital smelled stronger here, more chemical, the scent of alcohol wipes and bleach layered over the metallic hint that came with blood. It was faint now, but Emma could smell it anyway. She always could. The trauma bay doors were already open. A tech had the bed stripped and ready. A nurse checked the suction canister. Someone snapped on gloves. The room drew breath like a creature preparing to fight. In nursing school, the instructors had called it controlled chaos. Here, it was simply the way things were. People moved fast, but not randomly. There was an order to it that lived in muscle memory and clipped commands. Emma took her position where she was told, near the supply cart, close enough to help, far enough not to break anything. The ambulance arrived with a hard hiss of brakes. The bay doors flew open and the paramedics came in fast, pushing a gurney that rattled over the threshold. Their boots left wet prints on the floor. On the gurney lay a man with a shaved head and mud still clinging to the edges of his uniform. His skin was pale under the harsh lights, lips slightly blue, eyes closed. A cut on his cheek had been wiped clean, but not bandaged. Blood soaked the right side of his shirt, darkening the fabric and spreading toward his rib cage. His right shoulder was wrapped in gauze that had already turned pink at the edges. Oxygen tubing ran beneath his nose, and the paramedic at the head of the bed kept one hand on the patient's jaw, as if holding him to this world by force. Male, approximately 26, paramedic called out, voice rough from shouting over sirens. Single gunshot. Entry right, posterior shoulder, possible exit, anterior chest. Found conscious, then dropped. Pressure 60/40, pulse 130, respirations shallow. We gave fluids, no response. He's crashing. The trauma nurse at the foot of the bed, a man named Collins, snapped into motion. Move him over, he said. On 3, hands slid under the patient. The transfer was smooth. The gurney rolled away. The bed locks clicked. Someone attached leads. The heart monitor sprang to life with a rhythm that sounded too fast, too desperate. Beep, beep, beep like a sprint. Emma watched the soldier's throat flex as he tried to swallow. His skin was clammy. A dog tag chain glinted against his collarbone, catching the overhead light as the bed shifted. It was the kind of detail that stuck small and human in a room that tried to turn people into charts. Then Dr. Mason Grant entered. He did not hurry. He did not need to. The room bent toward him anyway, the way metal leans toward a magnet. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair cut short, his sleeves already pushed up as if he had been born ready. He had the calm of someone who had seen worse than this and survived it. His eyes swept the patient, the monitors, the nurses, and took everything in without wasting a blink. Dr. Lila Kang followed, quieter but no less sharp. She was smaller than Grant, with dark hair tucked into a cap, her expression composed as if she kept her emotions in a locked drawer. People moved out of her way without being told. She carried a tablet in one hand and a pen in the other, and her gaze went straight to the wound as if it were a question she intended to answer. Grant stepped to the bedside. Airway, he said. Respiratory moved in. A mask pressed over the patient's face. The soldier's chest rose, then shuddered. His eyes fluttered briefly, unfocused. "Sir, can you hear me?" Collins asked, leaning close. The soldier's lips parted. Something came out that might have been a name. It was lost under the noise of the room. Grant's hands were already gloved. He palpated the chest, quickly pressing, listening, with his eyes to the body's response. Kang checked pupils, then snapped a blood pressure cuff higher up the arm as if the limb itself offended her for failing. Emma's job in that moment was simple. Hand what was asked for. Stay silent. Do not draw attention. Suction, Grant said. A nurse passed it. Grant leaned in, suctioning fluid from the airway as the soldier gagged weakly. Oxygen saturation dipped. The monitor wailed for a second, then steadied as the tube went in. The endotracheal tube slid between vocal cords, confirmed with a quick movement, a practiced certainty. Respiratory secured it. A bag valve mask compressed in steady squeezes. Breath sounds, Kang said. Stethoscope touched skin, left clear, right diminished. Chest X-ray, Grant said. Now. Someone ran. A nurse started a second IV. Another drew blood. Collins called out the meds. Epinephrine. Pain control. Sedation. The words were clipped and fast, bouncing off the walls. Emma held a flush in her hand like a talisman. She watched blood thread through the IV tubing, bright and alive. The patient's name came from the paramedic report when someone finally had a second to read it. Staff Sergeant Ethan Rook. A unit number, a date of birth that made Emma's stomach twist because he was younger than her brother. Grant's voice cut through the noise again. We need to see the track. Find the exit. The gauze on the shoulder was peeled back. The entry wound was ugly torn, the skin ragged. Blood welled at the edges. Emma forced herself not to stare like a civilian. She had seen wounds before, but gunshot wounds were different. They looked less like injury and more like interruption. Kang moved to the chest fingers, pressing along ribs. There was a smaller wound near the front just left of center, not as messy. A clean hole like a punch through fabric. Possible exit, Kang said. Grant nodded once, already anticipating the imaging. The portable X-ray machine rolled in its wheels, squeaking. A tech slid a plate behind Ethan's back with careful speed. Emma watched the tech's hands, how sure they were. The machine beeped. The image came up on a screen in the corner, washed in gray and white ribs like thin ghosts. Grant leaned close, face still, eyes scanning. He did not speak for a moment. Silence stretched, and in that silence the monitor beeping sounded louder. Emma heard her own breath. Then Grant straightened. Through and through, he said. No obvious fragments. Kang's eyes narrowed. She stepped in, took a longer look. She traced the path with her gaze as if following a line on a map. No debris, she agreed. He's bleeding, though. Grant's jaw tightened. The room moved as one. Orders snapped. Someone called the operating room. Someone paged anesthesia. The bed wheels unlocked. Ethan's IV poles rattled as the team surged forward. Emma found herself pushing at the side rail, with Collins adding her strength to the momentum, feeling the bed's weight and the patient's frailty beneath it. As they rolled down the corridor, fluorescent lights strobing overhead, Emma caught glimpses of the hospital passing like a film reel. A janitor paused with a mop, pressing himself to the wall. A woman in a waiting area clutched a phone to her chest and stared. A security guard nodded once to Grant as if saluting. They reached the operating suite. Doors opened. The smell changed cleaner and colder. The OR was bright enough to make skin look unreal. Anesthesia took over the head of the bed. Ethan's body was transferred to the surgical table. The ventilator hissed. The monitors multiplied, each one a different voice telling a different truth. Emma stayed at the periphery where she belonged. She held supplies. She watched Grant and Kang scrub in their hands, moving under running water fingers, interlace the ritual steadying. There was something almost military about it. Preparation. Discipline. A readiness that refused to admit fear. Grant's eyes met Emma's for half a second over his mask. Not unkind. Not warm either. It was the look of someone who recognized a new face and filed it away as irrelevant to the outcome. Kang did not look at her at all. Kang looked at the patient and nothing else. Scalpel, Grant said. The first incision opened skin with a neat line. Blood welled. Suction pulled it away. The OR filled with a different kind of noise, quieter but more intense, the soft hum of machines. The clink of metal instruments being placed and replaced. The calm voices that did not rise, did not waver. Emma watched Grant's hands. They were steady in a way that felt almost unfair. No hesitation. No second-guessing. He navigated tissue like he had been born, knowing where every artery hid. Kang stood opposite, eyes fixed, instrument ready, anticipating before Grant asked. They moved together like a unit that had drilled this 1,000 times. The bleeding source was found and clamped. A vessel tied off. A section repaired. Blood pressure crept up. The monitor's frantic beep softened into something that resembled relief. Anesthesiology called out numbers. Grant responded with nods, short acknowledgments, nothing wasted. Emma's palms were damp inside her gloves. She forced herself to stay still. She did not want to be the reason someone had to repeat a command. At one point, Ethan's body jerked slightly under anesthesia, a reflex, and a thin line of sweat formed along his temple. Kang adjusted the drape without fuss. She looked at the wound, then at the monitor. "Stay with us," she murmured, "not for the room, not even for Emma, for the body on the table." Hours in a hospital did not move like normal hours. They folded. They stretched. Time became the space between vitals. When it was done, Grant stepped back, peeling off gloves with a snap. His shoulders loosened. He exhaled through his mask as if finally releasing a breath he had been holding since the ambulance arrived. Kang checked the field again, eyes scanning for anything missed, then nodded once. Closure looked almost delicate sutures placed with an intimacy that did not match the violence of what had happened. The skin came together. Bandages went on. The surgical site disappeared beneath sterile white as if the body's damage could be tidied away. Grant walked to the chart and signed it. The pen strokes were decisive. "Clean exit," he said to the team. "No fragments, no complications. He's stable." It was not arrogance in his tone, not obviously. It was certainty, the kind that made people want to believe. Kang echoed it with fewer words. "He's good." The OR staff moved on. Instruments were counted. Trays were cleared. The next case was already waiting somewhere in the building, another life on the conveyor belt of urgency. Ethan was transferred to a recovery bed, still intubated, still sedated, but his color looked better. His chest rose and fell in regulated rhythm under the ventilator's control. His heart rate slowed, his blood pressure held. Emma walked beside the bed as they pushed him back toward recovery. The corridor lights reflected off the clear plastic tubing. The IV bag swayed slightly with each bump in the floor. Ethan's hand lay limp at his side, fingers curled as if gripping something invisible. His dog tags rested against the sheets now no longer pressed to skin. In the recovery bay, nurses settled him in. Lines were checked, drips adjusted, vitals recorded. The routine moved like a practice dance. There was comfort in it, the predictability, the sense that this was where danger became management. Grant and Kang stood at the foot of the bed for a brief moment, scanning the monitors as if listening for dissent. The numbers behaved. The body seemed to agree with the chart. Grant looked satisfied. He spoke to Collins, then to the charge nurse. His voice was already shifting toward the next crisis, the next patient. Kang's gaze landed on Ethan's shoulder dressing, lingering for a fraction of a second. Then she turned away. Grant left first. Kang followed. Their footsteps faded down the hall, and the recovery bay's energy softened into a quieter vigilance. Emma remained. Collins handed her the assignment with the casualness of someone giving away the easiest task in the world. "Monitor him every 15 minutes, he said. "Watch for distress. Document. Call if anything changes." Emma nodded. "Yes, sir." When Collins walked away, she stood alone beside Ethan's bed for the first time since the ambulance arrived. The noise of the trauma bay had drained away, leaving a hush that felt almost unnatural. Machines spoke in gentle beeps. Oxygen hissed softly. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting shadows in corners that looked deeper than they should have. Emma checked his vitals again, more for her nerves than necessity. Heart rate steady. Blood pressure acceptable. Oxygen saturation holding. Temperature normal. Everything read like success. She looked at Ethan's face. In the harsh OR light, he had seemed like a body. Here, in the softened glow, he looked like a person again. A young man with a faint scar near his hairline, a small freckle on his cheek. His lashes rested against skin bruised by exhaustion. His mouth was slightly open around the tube, taped in place. Emma adjusted the blanket higher, a small gesture, something gentle in a night that had offered him none. She glanced at the shoulder dressing, then at the tubing, making sure nothing tugged. Standard, routine. The kind of tasks she had practiced in labs on mannequins, on cooperative patients who could speak. Her hands moved automatically, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe Grant's certainty. Allowed herself to feel that small relief that came when a patient survived. Then she noticed the angle of Ethan's shoulder. It was slightly elevated, pressed into the mattress in a way that would create a pressure spot if left too long. Emma had been taught to reposition to protect skin to keep circulation flowing. She had done it hundreds of times in training. It was basic nursing care, the kind that did not require a surgeon's permission. She slid one hand under his shoulder and the other along the side of his back, preparing to shift him just an inch. The moment her fingers pressed near the dressing, Ethan's breathing changed. It was subtle. The ventilator kept cycling. The monitor kept its steady beep, but the rise and fall of his chest turned uneven, as if his body had tried to pull away from her touch. His jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck stood out under skin. A sound escaped him, not a voice, not even a groan, just a faint involuntary rasp that made Emma's stomach drop. She froze hands still. For a second she did nothing but watch. The tension in his throat eased. The chest rhythm smoothed. The numbers stayed obedient. Emma eased her hands away. The change disappeared as if it had never happened. Her pulse hammered anyway. She leaned closer, eyes on Ethan's face, searching for any clue that she had imagined it. He remained sedated, expression blank, eyelids still. Emma placed her fingertips near the dressing again, gentler this time, using the lightest pressure she could manage. The hitch returned instantly. His chest tightened, breath shallow and sharp, like the body was trying to warn her in a language the machines did not translate. His jaw clenched harder, and the tendons along his neck rose like cords. Emma pulled her hand back as if burned. She stood there staring at her gloves, at the spotless white gauze, at the calm line on the monitor that insisted everything was fine. Her mind searched for explanations that would let her put this away. A reflex, a normal response, a random twitch. But the response had been consistent, precise, linked to one spot. Emma swallowed and stepped closer again, not touching this time, just looking. She studied the dressing's edge, the skin around it. There was a slight swelling that could be normal after surgery. There was nothing obvious, nothing dramatic. Still, her instincts refused to settle. She reached out again, slower now, tracing just beside the bandage, careful not to disturb the wound. The skin felt warm, slightly raised. Then her fingertips met it. Not swelling, not muscle. Something hard beneath the surface, small but unmistakable, as if a pebble had been pressed under the skin and forgotten there. It did not shift under pressure the way tissue should. It pressed back silent and foreign. Emma's breath caught. She looked at Ethan's face as his breathing sharpened again, and in that moment the quiet recovery bay felt less like safety and more like a room holding its breath. Her eyes flicked to the wall clock. 12:47 a.m. Emma's hand hovered above the call button, then moved instead toward the phone on the wall. Emma's fingers hovered over the phone for half a heartbeat, as if the plastic could judge her. The wall beside it was cool under her palm. The recovery bay had gone quiet in the way hospitals did when the worst seemed finished, when the staff scattered to the next fire and the machines were left to keep watch. Ethan Rook lay motionless, ventilator, sighing with steady patience. The monitor offered its calm green reassurance. Emma did not trust it. She picked up the receiver and dialed radiology from memory because her hands knew numbers better than her mind knew courage. The line rang twice. Radiology, a voice answered flat with fatigue. "This is Nurse Emma Wade in Trauma Recovery 2, Emma said. "I need a CT scan for Staff Sergeant Ethan Rook." There was a pause that felt like a door closing. A chair creaked on the other end, then a keyboard click. "That case is cleared," the voice said. Dr. Grant signed off. "I know. So why are you calling us?" Emma swallowed. She could hear her own pulse in her ears, loud as boots on tile. She stared at Ethan's shoulder, dressing the faint shadow of swelling beneath it the way his throat tightened when she touched the spot. "His breathing changes with palpation near the right posterior shoulder," Emma said. "There is a firm, foreign feeling under the dressing, and he reacts even sedated." Another pause, longer. The voice sharpened. "That is not an indication." "It is an assessment," Emma said, "and my assessment is that something is wrong." A sigh, slow and irritated. "You are asking for imaging based on a feeling." Emma closed her eyes for a second and forced herself to stay calm. She could not sound defensive. She could not sound uncertain. Those were the scents predators use to choose prey. I am asking for imaging based on a repeatable response to pressure and a palpable abnormality, she said. I will document. If you need authorization, I will escalate. But I need the scan ordered now. Who is this again? Emma Wade, RN. You are a nurse. Yes. The line went quiet. Emma imagined the person on the other end leaning back, thinking about policy, thinking about who would blame them for a scan that annoyed an attending surgeon. Hold, the voice said. The receiver hummed. Emma stared at the wall clock. The second hand moved with indifferent certainty. She could hear someone laughing softly at the nurse's station, a small sound that belonged to some other night. Behind her, Ethan's chest rose and fell. The ventilator made it look easy. His body felt like it was hiding something sharp. The line clicked back. Dr. Patel wants to know what kind of CT you are requesting. Emma's throat tightened. She had not expected that question either. She had expected refusal. She had expected ridicule, not specifics. CT cervical, spine, and upper thorax, Emma said, keeping her voice even. Include the shoulder region, if you can do contrast. Now she heard a second voice closer to the receiver, more alert. This is Dr. Naresh Patel, the radiologist said. Dr. Grant cleared this patient. He had surgery. The imaging already showed through and through. I understand, doctor. Then explain why you think you know better than the attending trauma surgeon. Emma felt heat rise in her face. She kept her gaze on Ethan's shoulder and spoke into the phone like she was reading a lab value. Because when I touch the wound area, his breathing becomes shallow and sharp, and there is a hard foreign feeling under the dressing near the shoulder blade. It is consistent. It happens every time. I am requesting imaging. Patel was silent for a moment. That is still thin, he said. If I run this, and it is nothing, I am the one who has to answer for it. Then let me be the one who answers, Emma said. Document that I requested it and why. I will put it in the chart. If Dr. Grant wants to write me up, he can. I am still requesting imaging. You are really doing this. Emma looked at Ethan's face. His lashes were still. His lips were taped around the tube. He could not argue for himself. He could not call anyone. He could not plead. His body could only tighten when pain found it. Yes, Emma said, I am. Patel exhaled, and she heard the sound of him shifting in his chair. I need to call the supervisor and confirm policy, he said. Stay by the phone. Emma held the receiver as if letting go would break the fragile thread she had managed to pull taut. She heard typing. She heard muffled voices. Then a click, and Patel was back. We will do it, he said. Transport will bring him down. Do not move him unnecessarily. Keep him stable. And Nurse Wade. Yes. If your note is vague, you will look vague. Be precise. Emma's mouth went dry. Understood. She hung up and stood there for a second staring at the phone like it might ring again with punishment. Her hands were shaking now. She forced them to stop. She walked to the computer station and opened Ethan's chart. Her fingers moved quickly. Nursing note. Time, assessment. Palpation near right posterior shoulder. Abnormal firmness, patient exhibits increased respiratory effort and muscular tension with contact concern for retained foreign body, or complication requested CT imaging through radiology, radiologist notified awaiting transport. She read it twice. No emotion, no drama, just facts. When she turned, she saw two nurses watching from the station. Their faces were carefully blank, the kind of blank that meant they were already talking in their heads. One of them leaned slightly toward the other and murmured something Emma could not hear, but the word rookie floated across the space like a dropped scalpel. Emma ignored them and went back to Ethan. She checked the ventilator tubing. She verified the IV drips. She rechecked the dressing without pressing on it. She kept her movements small, careful, as if the air itself might jostle something loose. A transport orderly appeared at the doorway pushing a mobile monitor. We'd taken him to CT, the orderly said, glancing at the chart. Yes, Emma said, I am going with him. The orderly raised his eyebrows, then shrugged. Fine with me. As they prepared to transfer Ethan, Emma felt the weight of every hand on the bed. Movement was routine in hospitals. Rolling a patient from bed to gurney was done 100 times a shift. But Emma could not forget the word mobile, a word that did not belong to a calm night. She adjusted the sheets. She secured the lines. She called for respiratory to accompany, and a therapist arrived with a portable ventilator moving briskly without asking why. "Ready," the therapist said. They moved Ethan carefully onto the transport bed, lifting in unison. Emma counted under her breath, not because the count mattered, but because it steadied her. The wheels locked. The monitor beeped. The portable ventilator hissed. They rolled into the hallway. Halfway down, a familiar voice stopped the air. Nurse Wade. Emma's stomach clenched. She turned. Dr. Mason Grant stood at the corner of the corridor, still in scrubs, his cap off now. His hair was damp at the temples as if he had washed his hands and then decided not to go home. His eyes flicked from Emma to the transport bed, then to the portable ventilator. "Where are you taking my patient?" Emma felt every gaze in the corridor turn toward them. Nurses slowed. A tech paused with a clipboard. Even the orderly stopped walking. "Radiology," Emma said. "T-scan." Grant's expression tightened. He stepped closer and his presence filled the hall. He did not need to raise his voice. He had a way of making silence gather around him like a protective detail. "Who ordered that?" "I did," Emma said. Grant stared at her as if she had spoken a language he refused to recognize. "You ordered imaging on my post-operative patient without discussing it with me." "I assessed a change," Emma said. "His breathing becomes irregular with palpation, and there is a firm abnormality beneath the dressing." Grant's jaw shifted. A muscle jumped near his cheek. "I performed the surgery," he said. "I reviewed the imaging. There were no fragments." "You have been here 3 weeks." Emma felt her face flush, but she did not look away. "Yes, sir." "Then you do not override my sign-off because you felt something," Grant said. "That is not advocacy. That is overstepping." Emma could hear Ethan's ventilator cycling. She could hear the monitor beeping steadily, calm as a lyre. She could feel the hard shape beneath the bandage in her fingertips as if it had stamped itself into her skin. "With respect, Dr. Grant." Emma said, keeping her voice quiet, "I am not overriding you. I am escalating a concern. I requested the scan and documented it. Radiology accepted." Grant's eyes narrowed. For a second, Emma thought he would cancel it on the spot. He could. He had the authority. He had the reputation. He could call the charge nurse and have Emma removed from the case, and it would happen before she could blink. Instead, he looked past her at the bed, at Ethan's pale face, at the dog tags resting against the blanket. "Fine," Grant said, voice clipped. "Run your scan. When it shows nothing, we will address this." Emma nodded once. "Yes, sir." Grant stepped back, letting the transport pass. His gaze remained on Emma as they rolled away. It was not anger exactly. It was calculation, as if he were deciding what to do with a problem that had learned to speak. The CT suite was colder than the rest of the hospital, cold enough to raise gooseflesh under Emma's scrubs. The lighting was different too, more sterile, more unforgiving. The machine itself sat like an enormous white ring, humming softly, waiting. They transferred Ethan onto the CT table. Respiratory adjusted the portable ventilator. Emma stood near the head of the bed, watching the tubing, watching Ethan's face, watching the way his eyelids remained still, while his body gave her no permission to relax. A technician positioned him. The table slid forward with a mechanical whir. Ethan disappeared into the ring. The machine spoke in its own language, a series of clicks and low pulses. The tech's voice came through an intercom calm procedural. "Beginning scan." Emma watched from behind the glass. The radiology room smelled faintly of warmed plastic. A small clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Dr. Patel entered behind her, carrying a tablet. He looked tired, but his eyes were awake now, focused in a way that made Emma's skin tighten. He did not speak at first. He stood beside a workstation and brought up the images, scrolling through slices with practiced speed. His finger moved in short, precise motions. His gaze tracked each change like he was following a trail. Emma held her breath without noticing she had done it. Patel stopped scrolling. He zoomed in. He tilted his head slightly, then leaned closer. "There," he said quietly. Emma stepped forward until she was close enough to see the screen. The grayscale anatomy filled her vision bones, bright, soft tissue, darker. Near the cervical spine, just off the edge of a vertebra, a small, bright object gleamed like a spark trapped in meat. It was not large. It did not need to be. "That is metal," Patel said. Emma's throat went dry. Near C6, Patel added, his voice lowering. "It is sitting where it should not be sitting." Emma stared at the image until her eyes hurt. It was real. It existed. The hard thing under the bandage had a shape now, a location, a danger. How Emma whispered, then stopped because the question was pointless. Patel's jaw tightened. He tapped the screen, showing the object's position relative to the spine. He scrolled forward and back, watching how it shifted slightly between slices. "It is mobile," he said. "That is the part I do not like." He reached for the phone on the desk, his movements suddenly brisk. "Page Dr. Grant Patel," said into the receiver. "Now, also page Dr. Kang and anesthesia. We need the OR." Emma turned toward the glass where Ethan lay in the CT ring, still and silent. The staff moved quickly now. The technician slid the table back out. Respiratory stepped in to stabilize hands, sure face tight. A nurse from radiology brought a cervical collar. "Do we have reason to immobilize?" the nurse asked. Patel did not look up from the screen. "Yes," he said. "Put it on." Minimal movement. Emma stepped forward, helping position the collar. Ethan's head was heavy in her hands, a strange intimacy, supporting the weight of a man who had survived bullets, only to be threatened by a shard left behind. She moved carefully as if the wrong angle would change his life forever. Grant arrived, fast shoes squeaking slightly on the CT floor. He came through the door with Kang a step behind him. Grant's face was set controlled, but his eyes went straight to the screen, as if drawn by gravity. Patel turned the monitor toward him. No theatrics, no speeches, just the image. Grant stared. The set of his mouth shifted. Color drained from his face in a way so subtle, Emma might have missed it if she had not been watching him the way prey watched predators. Kang leaned in, eyes narrowing. Her composure held, but something in her gaze fractured a hairline crack. She looked at Emma for the first time that night, as if seeing her as more than a badge. Grant did not speak for a long moment. Then he exhaled a short, controlled breath. "We take him back," he said. Kang nodded once. "Now." They moved Ethan back through the hospital with the collar in place, with hands on the bed rails like anchors. The corridor seemed longer than before. The fluorescent lights felt harsher. Staff stepped aside as the team passed. Emma walked at the head of the bed beside respiratory, watching the ventilator tubing, watching Ethan's face, watching the collars fit. They entered the OR suite again, and the air changed back to that cold, clean intensity. Scrub techs pulled instruments from sterile packs. Anesthesia set up without being asked. Gloves snapped on. Drapes opened like wings. Emma stood just outside the OR doors as Grant and Kang scrubbed in again. Their motions were the same ritual as before, but the energy around them had shifted. The easy certainty was gone. The movements were still controlled, but they carried a different weight, the kind that came from knowing exactly how close the edge was. When the doors closed, Emma was left in the hallway with the sound of the ventilator fading inside and the muted cadence of surgical voices. She waited. Time returned to that strange hospital shape, stretched thin, then folded back on itself. Emma sat in a hard plastic chair, with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. She stared at the floor, at a scuff mark on the tile that someone had tried and failed to polish out. She listened to the faint hum behind the doors and tried not to imagine metal moving. A nurse she did not know passed, glanced at Emma, and kept walking. A few minutes later, another passed, slower eyes lingering, then gone. Emma could feel the story spreading through the unit without anyone saying it out loud. The rookie ordered a scan. The rookie challenged Grant. The rookie made trouble. Emma kept her gaze on the doors. After what felt like an hour, but might have been 20 minutes, the OR doors opened briefly. A scrub tech stepped out to grab an additional instrument, hands held up, eyes focused. The door swung shut again. Emma's mouth tasted like copper. When it was finally over, Grant emerged first. His mask was down his face, damp at the jawline. He did not look triumphant. He looked tired. Kang followed, expression composed again, but her eyes were not the same as they had been earlier. Anesthesia wheeled Ethan out, still sedated, still intubated, but stable. The collar remained in place. The dressing on his shoulder was new, clean white, not yet stained. Grant spoke to the recovery nurse in low tones. Emma caught fragments. Fragment removed. No additional debris. Stable vitals. The words landed in Emma's chest like a delayed exhale. As the bed rolled past, Emma walked beside it, one hand resting lightly on the rail. Ethan's face remained still, but the tightness in his neck had eased. The monitor beeped a steady rhythm that sounded less like a sprint and more like a march. Back in recovery, they settled Ethan again. The ventilator was reconnected. The lines were checked. The collar was adjusted. Emma watched every step as if she could protect him by refusing to blink. Grant stood at the foot of the bed for a moment. His gaze moved over the monitors, the tubing, the bandage. Then it flicked briefly to Emma. His expression was unreadable, the kind of blank soldiers wore when they had learned to keep their thoughts behind their teeth. "You documented," he said. "Yes, sir," Emma replied. Grant nodded once sharp and small, then turned away. Kang followed him out without a word. Their footsteps faded down the corridor again, quieter this time, as if the hospital itself had absorbed the sound. Emma stayed until the recovery nurse told her she could step out. She went to the break room and sat with her hands wrapped around the same coffee she had set down hours earlier. It had gone cold. She drank it anyway. The bitterness grounded her. Outside a narrow window, the rain had eased. The sky was beginning to thin from black to dark gray, the first weak hint of morning pressing against the horizon. Emma stared at it for a long time, then stood and walked back to Ethan's bedside. His vitals held. His chest rose and fell with less strain. The collar remained the bandage clean. The monitor beeped steadily, and for the first time since the ambulance arrived, Emma felt the tight coil in her stomach loosen by a fraction. She pulled up a chair, opened his chart again, and added one more note, precise and plain, recording the sequence of events as the hospital required. Her hands did not shake this time. Emma saved the note, logged out, and sat for a moment with the cursor still blinking in her mind. The room smelled faintly of warmed plastic from the ventilator tubing and the sharp sweetness of chlorhexidine that never fully left a recovery bay. Ethan's numbers held steady. The collar kept his neck aligned. The new dressing lay clean and bright, a neat square of gauze that hid the violence beneath it. A charge nurse passed the doorway, glanced in, and kept walking. A respiratory therapist checked the ventilator settings without speaking. The hospital had already begun to drift back toward normal, as if normal were something you could return to by force of routine. Emma stayed close to the bed anyway, listening for the smallest change. She watched Ethan's face as if he might suddenly wake and tell her she had imagined everything. When her shift finally ended, it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a pause. Emma walked through corridors that were turning pale with morning. The fluorescent lights seemed less harsh, now diluted by a thin wash of daylight creeping through windows. In the staff hallway, the smell shifted from antiseptic and blood to coffee and printer toner. People spoke louder as if daylight granted permission. Emma moved on instinct more than thought, heading for the locker area to grab her bag, hoping for 5 minutes of quiet. Her scrubs clung slightly at the back of her neck with dried sweat. She had not realized how thirsty she was until she tasted her own breath. She rounded the corner near administration and slowed not because she meant to, but because she heard her name. The administrative conference room door was not closed all the way. The sound of voices slipped through the crack, clean and confident, the kind of voices that belonged to people who had never been told no. Director Cynthia Russell was speaking. Her tone carried relief wrapped in authority, as if she were already smoothing the edges of a crisis. "So you caught it during review," she said. "Thank God. Another hour, and we would have had a catastrophic outcome." Emma's steps stopped without her permission. She stood in the hallway, bag strap biting into her shoulder, the carpet muffling her shoes. She told herself to keep walking. She told herself it was not her business. Then she heard Dr. Mason Grant. "That is correct," Director Grant said, voice smooth, almost casual. "Dr. Kang and I were rechecking the initial images. Something did not sit right. We ordered additional imaging and found the fragment near the cervical spine. We brought him back in quickly." Emma felt her stomach drop as if an elevator had started descending too fast. Her mouth went dry. The air around her seemed suddenly too thin. Dr. Lila Kang added, brisk and composed, "We have already discussed tightening our internal review process. We will implement a second read protocol for trauma scans." Director Russell exhaled. "I am grateful you were thorough. I do not even want to imagine the headlines." Emma's fingers curled around the strap of her bag. She could hear the steady calm in their voices, the ease with which they placed themselves at the center of the story. The night in the corridor, Grant's cold stare, his warning about boundaries, the radiology phone line humming, while Emma fought to keep her voice steady. All of it vanished under Grant's measured lie. Emma backed away from the door before anyone could glance up and see her. She turned and walked, forcing her pace to stay normal. She did not run. Running would look like guilt, like panic. She walked until she reached the nurse's station, then kept walking until she found an empty alcove near a supply closet. She stood there, breathing slowly, pressing her palm to the wall until the coolness steadied her. Anger rose first sharp and bright, then fear arrived behind it, heavier, more practical. 2 attendings. An administrator. A clean narrative designed to protect the hospital and the doctors who made it look good. Emma was a new nurse with a badge that still shined. If she spoke up without proof, she would not just lose the argument. She would lose her future. Then she remembered her note. She remembered the timestamp. She remembered Dr. Patel's insistence on precision. Emma walked back to the nurse's station and sat at a computer terminal, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the screen. She logged into the electronic medical record with fingers that felt strangely calm now. The system loaded slowly, as if savoring her anxiety. Ethan Rook's chart opened. Emma clicked to orders. There it was, plain and unforgiving. CT cervical spine and upper thorax ordered by Nurse Emma Wade, time-stamped 12:47 a.m. Her throat tightened again, but this time it was not fear. It was a hard, steady certainty that lived in black and white. She opened the order details. Radiology acceptance time. Dr. Patel's name. Transport log. Scan completion time. The second surgery note entered afterward. Each piece of the night lined up like footprints in wet concrete. Emma printed the order history at the station printer, careful to keep her hands from shaking as paper slid out. She folded the pages once and slipped them into her bag. She opened the phone log system next, the one nurses used for internal calls. The line to radiology. Outgoing call from Trauma Recovery 2. Time stamped 12:47 a.m. Duration. Destination extension. She printed that too. She pulled up her nursing note, the one she had written with dry facts and no emotion. She read it again, checking for any word that could be twisted. It was clean. It was specific. It was the truth. A voice behind her made her flinch. "You okay, Wade?" It was Tasha, the trauma nurse, who had said, "Here we go," hours ago. Tasha leaned on the counter with a half-empty cup of coffee, eyes sharp beneath tired lids. Emma kept her face neutral. "I am fine." Tasha glanced at the printer tray, at the folded pages in Emma's hand. "Fine," she repeated, not buying it. Then she lowered her voice. You really ordered that scan? Emma met her eyes. Yes. Tasha's mouth tightened. You got guts. Emma did not answer. She could not tell if Tasha meant it as praise or warning. Tasha shifted her weight. Grant is not going to like being embarrassed. Emma's jaw clenched. Grant tried to take credit for it. Emma said quieter than she meant to. Tasha blinked once, then her expression went still. Where did you hear that? In the conference room, Emma said. He told Russell that he ordered it. He said they noticed an irregularity and ordered additional imaging. Tasha's gaze flicked around, checking the nearby nurses and techs. People moved and talked and laughed in small bursts. Nobody looked like they were listening, but hospitals were made of listening. Tasha spoke softly. You have proof you ordered it. Emma patted her bag. Timestamps. Tasha's face hardened in a way Emma had not seen before. Good, keep it. Do not let anyone talk you out of keeping it. Emma nodded once. Tasha straightened and walked away, as if they had discussed nothing more serious than a shift change. Emma watched her go, then opened her bag and pulled out the small notebook she carried in her pocket every shift. The cover was cheap and the pages were creased. Her handwriting from the night before slanted, slightly rushed but legible. Patient exhibits irregular respiratory pattern with palpation near right posterior shoulder. Firm abnormality beneath dressing. Requested CT despite clearance. Emma traced the words with her fingertip, feeling a strange comfort in ink. She added the date and time at the bottom of the page and signed her name, not because she thought anyone would read the notebook, but because it reminded her she existed in the record of what happened. When her phone buzzed in her pocket, it startled her. She looked down. Recovery unit. She answered. This is Emma. Nurse Wade, a voice said. Ethan Rook is waking up. He is agitated. Can you come in a minute? He keeps trying to reach for his collar. Emma's heart tightened. I am coming. She tucked the notebook back into her bag and headed for recovery. The corridor felt different now. Lighter with day staff, louder with carts and conversation. But Emma moved through it as if she were still in the middle of the night. Her mind kept replaying Grant's voice in the conference room, the ease of the lie. In Ethan's room, the lights were low. A nurse stood at the bedside, one hand on Ethan's forearm, speaking in a soothing voice. A respiratory therapist adjusted the ventilator tubing, preparing for the moment they could remove it. Ethan's eyes were open unfocused at first, then sharpening in quick flashes of awareness and fear. His brows pulled together. His fingers flexed, searching. Emma stepped in quietly. Ethan's gaze found her and locked. Something shifted in his face. Recognition did not make sense, but his attention sharpened anyway, as if her presence anchored him. The nurse glanced at Emma. He keeps trying to sit up. He is asking questions. Emma moved to the bedside, careful not to crowd him. Ethan's chest rose and fell more on its own now, his breathing less dictated by the machine. Sweat beaded near his hairline. Emma leaned slightly closer so he would not have to strain. Staff Sergeant Rook, she said, voice calm. You are in the hospital. You are safe. Ethan's lips moved around the tube. A sound pushed out rough and frustrated. The nurse placed a hand on his shoulder, gentle but firm. Easy, she said. You have a collar on. Do not fight it. Ethan's eyes cut to the collar, then back to Emma. His throat worked as if swallowing sand. The respiratory therapist gestured to Emma. We are going to lighten sedation and assess. He is stable. If he keeps breathing well, we can extubate. Emma nodded. She watched Ethan's eyes, watched the fear flicker there, the need to understand. She had seen this look in other patients the moment when pain and confusion collided. Ethan's hand lifted weakly. He pointed to his shoulder, then to his neck. His eyebrows lifted in a silent question. Emma answered without lying and without giving him the whole war in the hallway. You were shot, she said. The first surgery stopped the bleeding. We found a small piece of metal near your neck, so the doctors took you back in and removed it. The collar is to keep you still while you recover. Ethan stared at her. Then his eyes narrowed as if he were sorting her words for something missing. He tried to speak again and grimaced. The nurse leaned close. "We cannot understand with the tube and honey." "Breathe." Ethan forced himself to breathe, eyes still on Emma. The respiratory therapist worked methodically, suctioning, checking his gag reflex, lowering ventilator support. Ethan's breathing held steady. After a few minutes, they removed the tube. Ethan coughed hard, then again, a deep, raw sound that shook his body. His face flushed. Tears sprang to his eyes from the irritation. Emma waited until the coughing eased, then offered him a small cup of water with a straw. He sipped carefully, wincing. His voice came out hoarse. "Metal," he rasped, "near my neck." "Yes," Emma said. "Who found it?" he asked. The nurse at the bedside shifted her stance, eyes flicking briefly toward Emma, then away. The room was quiet, except for the monitor. Emma felt the question land like a weight. She could dodge it. She could say the team. She could let the lie settle because it would be easier. It would keep the peace. It would keep her job safe. Ethan watched her carefully, as if he had learned in some other life how to tell when someone was holding back. Emma chose words that were true and minimal. "I noticed something during your recovery assessment," she said. "I requested the scan." Ethan stared at her as if the room had tilted. His throat bobbed. His hands flexed on the blanket. "You," he said, voice rougher now. "A nurse." Emma held his gaze. "Yes." Ethan's eyes shone not with tears now, but with something fiercer. He looked away for a second, staring at the ceiling, then back at her. "They said I was fine," he said. "They believed you were stable," Emma replied. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Stable," he repeated, and his voice carried the weight of the word like a curse. He lifted his hand again, pointing at Emma, then dropping it weakly. "You saved me." Emma felt heat sting behind her eyes. She kept her face calm. "The care plan, the boundary, the professionalism. We did what we needed to do," she said. Ethan shook his head, a small movement constrained by the collar. "It is not we," he said. "It is you." The nurse at the bedside cleared her throat softly and adjusted the IV drip, giving Emma a moment to breathe. Ethan's voice lowered. "Why is a nurse ordering scans?" Emma did not answer immediately. She could not put hospital politics onto a patient's chest while he was still learning how to breathe without a machine. "You focus on resting," she said. "Your job is to heal." Ethan watched her, then gave a slow nod, as if accepting that there were limits to what she could say here. He swallowed again, voice raw. "My chain of command will want details," he said. "They will ask." Emma's stomach tightened. She heard the echo of polished shoes in her imagination, but she pushed it away. She did not let her face change. "Right now," Emma said, "the only detail that matters is that you are safe." Ethan's gaze did not soften. It steadied. "I will remember your name," he said. Emma's throat tightened again. She nodded once. He closed his eyes, exhaustion reclaiming him in slow waves. After she left his room, the hallway seemed louder. Emma walked back to the nurse's station with her bag heavy against her hip. She could feel the paper inside it, the prints and logs, the thin, hard proof that did not care about status. Her shift was over, but she did not go home. She sat at a computer terminal and opened the hospital incident reporting system, the one most staff avoided unless forced. The screen asked for categories and descriptions drop-down menus that made human danger look tidy. Emma filled it in anyway. Patient name. Date. Unit, description of event. She typed carefully, staying precise. She documented the abnormal response to palpation. She documented the request for imaging and the timestamp. She documented the CT finding of a retained metallic fragment near C6 and the emergent return to the operating room. She attached the order history printout and the phone log printout. She attached her nursing note. In the section asking for additional concerns, Emma hesitated, fingers hovering above the keys. The lie in the conference room sat in her chest like a splinter. She had no recording, no witness willing to sign a statement, only her memory of Grant's voice and Kang's agreement. Memory was soft. Memory could be dismissed. But the record was not soft. The record was already a contradiction. Emma typed one more paragraph, careful and factual. At approximately 7:45 a.m., I overheard Dr. Mason Grant and Dr. Lila Kang in an administrative briefing stating that they ordered the additional imaging after post-operative review. This statement conflicts with the electronic medical record order log showing imaging was requested by nursing at 12:47 a.m. I am reporting this discrepancy due to concern for accurate documentation and patient safety review. She read it twice. She removed any word that sounded like accusation. She kept only what she could support. Her finger hovered over submit. For a moment, she imagined Grant hearing about it. She imagined his expression the way the hallway had gone quiet when he spoke. She imagined her schedule suddenly changing her assignments, shifting to the worst tasks, her name spoken with irritation in rooms she could not enter. Then she remembered Ethan's eyes when he said, "You saved me." Emma clicked submit. The system whirred for a second, then displayed a confirmation number. An email landed in her inbox with the report ID time-stamped, routed to patient safety and quality review. Emma sat back and let herself breathe once slow and controlled. She closed her bag, tightened the strap, and finally stood. Outside, the rain had stopped. The parking lot shimmered with leftover water under the morning sun. Emma walked to her car with the hospital behind her, a building full of bright windows and darker corners, and the confirmation email still glowing on her phone screen like a quiet, unarguable fact. The confirmation email sat in Emma's inbox like a stamped document you could not unwrite. When she woke after 3 hours of restless sleep, it was still there, subject line plain and bureaucratic time stamped with the same precision as her scan request. She stared at it from the edge of her bed phone light washing her face and felt the hospital pull at her from miles away. The building had a way of staying under your skin even when you were home. By the time she drove back for her next shift, the sun was up and Fayetteville looked ordinary again. Traffic moved. People bought coffee. A jogger crossed the street near a strip mall without ever glancing toward Piedmont Sentinel Medical Center, as if the lives hanging in that building were someone else's problem. Emma parked in the staff lot and sat in her car for a moment with her hands on the wheel. The steering wheel was warm from the sun. Her hands were cold anyway. Inside, the hospital smelled like morning, bleach and pastries from the volunteer cart, printer paper and cheap cologne. The night shift had thinned out. Day staff filled the corridors, clipped voices trading updates, shoes squeaking with purpose. Emma walked past the elevators and saw Dr. Mason Grant at the far end of the hallway speaking to a resident. He did not look at her. His posture was calm, his expression neutral, as if the last 24 hours had been filed away with the rest of his cases. Dr. Lila Kang passed behind him, carrying a chart. Her gaze skimmed the corridor and moved on. No recognition, no flicker. Emma kept walking. In the patient safety and quality review office on the 3rd floor, the air was different. Quieter carpeted the lights, softer, as if the hospital tried to make accountability feel less sharp. Dr. Henry Sloan sat at a desk that faced a window looking out over a row of pines. He had the kind of face that did not waste emotion. His hair was gray at the temples, his sleeves rolled up, hands resting on a folder. The folder was Emma's incident report, printed and clipped, the attached documents stacked neatly behind it. Sloan read the report without moving much eyes, working down the page in steady passes. When he reached the section about the administrative briefing, his gaze paused. He picked up the order history printout and stared at the timestamp. 12:47 a.m. Then he looked at the phone log. Same time, same direction. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Get me Director Russell's assistant," he said. A pause. Then patient safety. "How can I help you?" A voice answered. "Tell Cynthia Russell I need her for a briefing at 9:30, Sloan said. "And tell her to bring legal." He hung up, then opened a second file drawer. Inside were thin folders with bland labels, trauma cases retained foreign body post-operative complications. He pulled one, then another, stacking them on his desk like pieces of a machine. The folder edges were worn from use, and that detail mattered. It meant these topics were not rare. Sloan logged into the hospital's case tracking system and searched by provider. Mason Grant, Lila Kang. The system offered a list that scrolled past the visible screen dates and procedure codes and outcomes. Sloan narrowed it down to trauma cases involving projectiles and penetrating injuries. The list shortened, not short enough. He leaned back slightly and stared at the screen as if listening for something behind the data. Then he clicked into the first case and began reading not just the surgeon's notes but the nursing notes, the radiology impressions, the postoperative vitals. His eyes moved with the hunter's patience. At 9:30, Director Cynthia Russell arrived with hospital counsel, a man in a dark suit whose tie looked too expensive for the building's fluorescent lights. Russell's expression was controlled, professional, her hair perfectly arranged. She carried a tablet and a legal pad as if organization could keep the situation small. Sloan did not offer a seat. He did not need to. "We have an incident report, filed by a nurse," Sloan said, holding up Emma's folder. "It concerns an emergent return to surgery after a retained metallic fragment was discovered near the cervical spine." Russell's jaw tightened slightly. "Grant already debriefed me." Sloan slid the order history printout across the desk. "Grant debriefed you incorrectly." Russell looked down. Her eyes moved to the timestamp. She did not react loudly. Her lips pressed together. The lawyer leaned in reading, then straightened. Sloan continued, voice calm. "The nursing request for additional imaging was submitted at 12:47 a.m. The radiology call log corroborates that. Dr. Patel confirms the scan was performed as a result of that request." Russell's gaze lifted. "Is the patient stable?" "Yes," Sloan said. "That is not the question in front of us." The lawyer's voice was smooth. "What exactly are you alleging, doctor?" Sloan met his eyes. "I am not alleging. I am documenting a discrepancy between the medical record and statements made to administration." Russell's nostrils flared slightly. "You have evidence of what was said in the meeting." Sloan tapped the folder. The nurse documented what she overheard. "That statement conflicts with the record. I am initiating a formal review." The lawyer's mouth tightened. "You understand the implications?" Sloan's expression did not change. "I understand them better than you think." Russell exhaled, then nodded once, as if conceding a move in a chess game. "Fine," she said. "Review it. Keep it contained. We do not need panic." Sloan did not answer that. He opened another file on his desk and pushed it toward her. "I also need access to the past 5 years of trauma cases led by Dr. Grant and Dr. Kang," Sloan said. "Full charts, nursing notes, imaging." Russell's brows lifted. 5 years. Sloan's voice remained even. "The CT report uses the phrase retained metallic fragment. It is not an everyday complication. It is a category." The lawyer shifted his weight. "This is a significant audit." Sloan nodded once. "That is what it is." Russell's gaze hardened, but she did not refuse. She looked like someone calculating damage control. She tapped her tablet twice and spoke without looking at Sloan. "I will authorize access," Russell said. "But you will coordinate with legal on messaging." Sloan waited until she finished, then spoke in the same calm tone. "I am coordinating with patient safety," he said. "That is my mandate." Russell's eyes narrowed, then she gave a tight nod and left lawyer and stepped behind her. When the door closed, Sloan pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote 3 words at the top pattern. Providers. Outcomes. Then he drew a line beneath them and began to fill the page with case numbers. By noon, Sloan's office held stacks of charts. Some printed, some digital, some brought in on rolling carts by staff who avoided eye contact as they passed. Sloan recruited 2 nurse reviewers and a data analyst from quality improvement. They sat with laptops and highlighters, not speaking much, their work measured and methodical. A chart opened on a screen. Motorcycle crash. Penetrating shrapnel. Surgery documented as successful. Discharge planned. 3 days later, fever. White blood cell count climbing. Sudden septic shock. Return to surgery at another facility. Retained foreign object noted in external documentation. Sloan circled that line on the report with a pen, then wrote the case number on his pad. Another chart. Stabbing. Postoperative pain described by nursing as localized unusual. Surgeon note, normal recovery. Patient returns a week later with worsening pain and swelling. Imaging shows retained fragment. Corrective procedure performed. Another circle, another case number. In the afternoon, Sloan began staff interviews. He did not call them investigations. He called them conversations. It made people less defensive, and Sloan had learned long ago that the truth came out faster when you did not kick the door in. He brought in Maria Lopez first, an experienced trauma nurse with tired eyes and a spine that seemed made of steel. She sat in a chair across from Sloan's desk, hands folded, gaze steady. "You worked on a motorcycle crash case 2 years ago," Sloan said, sliding a chart summary toward her. "Do you remember it?" Maria glanced down. Her eyes moved across the page. A muscle in her jaw tightened. "Yes," she said. "Tell me what you remember," Sloan said. Maria's fingers pressed lightly into her own palm. "The surgery was fast," she said. "Dr. Grant was in a hurry. He said it was clean." The patient looked good in recovery. Then he spiked a fever. He complained of pain that did not make sense. I remember thinking something was off. "Did you report it?" Sloan asked. Maria's gaze dropped for a fraction of a second. "I wrote notes," I told the resident. The resident told me Grant said complications happen. Sloan nodded as if confirming something he had already seen. "Did you believe it?" Sloan asked. Maria's mouth tightened. "I wanted to," she said. "It was easier." Sloan did not respond with judgment. He simply wrote. Next came David Tran, a surgical tech who had assisted in dozens of trauma cases. He sat with his shoulders hunched, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the table surface. "Tell me about the stabbing victim you worked with last year," Sloan said. David swallowed. "Dr. Kang did that one," he said. She said it was straightforward. "What happened afterward?" Sloan asked. David's voice lowered. The patient kept saying it hurt in one spot, not normal soreness. He kept pointing to the same place. The nurses thought he was anxious. Kang said he was drug-seeking. He got discharged. He showed up at another hospital and they found a fragment on CT. "Did anyone bring that back to Kang?" Sloan asked. David's lips pressed together. The chart note said the other hospital likely misinterpreted the imaging. "That is what I heard." Sloan wrote again. His pen moved steadily, each stroke turning memory into record. Over the next day, more staff came in. Some were defensive. Some were frightened. Some were angry in a way they had never felt safe enough to show. Their stories differed in details but rhymed in shape: a missed sign, a dismissed concern, a confident signature, a complication explained away. Sloan's pad filled with case numbers. The data analyst began building a spreadsheet: procedure type, injury type, post-operative complication, readmission mortality. When the numbers were plotted, the pattern was not subtle. 17 cases flagged for review. 17 instances where the post-operative course included unexplained pain, unexpected infection, sudden neurological symptoms, delayed bleeding. 17 charts where nursing notes contained words like concerned, unusual, not consistent, and surgeon notes contained words like stable, expected, normal. 3 of those cases ended in death. Sloan sat alone at his desk after the reviewers left for the night. The building had quieted. The lights outside his window reflected off the glass, turning the pines into dark silhouettes. Sloan stared at the mortality notes and did not move for a long time. Then he opened a new document and began to write a preliminary report. On the second page, he typed the phrase, "attempted misattribution of clinical escalation." It was careful language, the kind that survived lawyers, but the meaning was clear. In another part of the hospital, Emma worked her shift with a steady face. She did her vitals, her medication checks, her documentation. She avoided the administrative wing. She avoided looking for Grant in the hallway. She could feel the unit's attention on her in small glances that darted away when she looked back. A rumor did not need words. It lived in posture. That afternoon, she walked into a supply room and found Tasha leaning against a shelf, arms crossed. "You filed a report," Tasha said quietly. Emma froze for half a second. "How do you know?" Tasha's eyes stayed on hers. "Because the charge nurse asked who was involved." "They are nervous." Emma's pulse kicked. "Are they angry?" Tasha shrugged slightly. "They are cautious. That is different." Emma tried to keep her voice even. "I had to." Tasha nodded once, like she understood more than Emma had said. "Keep your copies," Tasha added. "Do not rely on the system alone." Emma's fingers tightened around the saline flush she held. "I printed everything." "Good," Tasha said. Then she pushed off the shelf and left, disappearing into the hallway like she had never been there. By the third day, the hospital's mood had changed. It was subtle. Meetings were held behind closed doors. The legal department's lights stayed on later than usual. Nurses noticed administrators walking through the units more often, looking at boards, looking at staff, smiling too tightly. Director Russell called a brief leadership huddle in her office. Department heads came. Risk management came. The lawyer came again. Sloan came as well, folder, thicker now, face unchanged. Russell spoke first. "We have a patient safety review underway," she said. "We need to keep this from becoming a circus." The chief of staff leaned forward. "If there are 17 cases, it is already a circus," he said. Russell's eyes flashed. "Watch your language." Sloan placed his folder on the table. "Language does not change outcomes," he said. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Doctor, we need to consider exposure. Families, media, board reporting requirements." Sloan's gaze stayed calm. "Consider patients first," he said. "Exposure follows reality." Russell's hand tightened around her pen. "We will not broadcast this," she said. "We will manage it internally." The chief of staff's voice turned hard. "If there were deaths involved, internal management is not enough." Sloan did not raise his voice. "It will not stay internal," he said. "There are mandatory reporting thresholds. There are licensing boards. There are legal obligations. We can do this with control or without it." Russell stared at him, then looked away as if the room itself had become too small. That morning, Ethan Rook's condition continued to improve. He remained in a collar, but his neurological checks were intact. He could move his fingers. He could lift his arms slightly with assistance. His voice was still rough, but his eyes were clear. He asked questions in the crisp, persistent way of someone trained to gather facts. A nurse tried to deflect. Ethan did not accept it. When Emma came in to check his vitals, Ethan watched her closely. "They tell me the surgeons noticed it," he said, voice quieter now but firm. Emma's stomach tightened. She kept her hand steady as she adjusted the blood pressure cuff. "The record shows the timing," Emma said carefully. Ethan's gaze narrowed. "The record shows you," he said. "That is what Dr. Patel told me when I asked." Emma looked up surprised. "Patel spoke to you." Ethan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I know how to ask questions," he said. Then his face hardened. "My command will want names." Emma held his gaze. "Your care team is focused on your recovery," she said. Ethan's voice dropped. "My care team tried to erase you." Emma said nothing. Silence was safer than agreement, but silence did not feel innocent anymore. Ethan's eyes held hers. "I'm not a nobody," he said. Emma's throat tightened. "I know." "You do not know," Ethan replied, and his voice carried a weight that belonged to a different world. He looked away toward the window, then back. "Someone is coming." Emma did not ask who. She could feel the answer in the way he spoke and the certainty. She finished her vitals and moved to leave, but Ethan stopped her with a small lift of his hand. "Nurse Wade," he said. Emma turned. "Thank you," Ethan said, and his voice was simple, stripped of rank and anger. Emma nodded once and left the room with her heart pounding. Late that afternoon, a black SUV rolled into the hospital's main entrance, with the smooth quiet of something expensive and controlled. It did not announce itself with lights or sirens. It did not need to. The vehicle stopped, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the rear door opened. General Harrison Klein stepped out first. Tall, silver hair cut close shoulders broad, beneath a dress uniform that looked pressed by discipline itself. His face was calm in the way of a man who had learned never to show strain. General Renee Maddox followed her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the entrance as if mapping threats. General Thomas Reed stepped out last, slightly younger than Klein, his expression quieter but no less intense. Metals caught the light when they moved, small flashes of metal that drew eyes without demanding attention. The lobby fell into a hush so deep it felt staged. A volunteer at the information desk stopped mid-sentence. A patient in a wheelchair stared openly. A nurse walking past froze for a beat, then straightened as if remembering how to stand. The generals walked with measured steps, boots clicking on polished floor in clean rhythm. They did not pause at the desk. They did not ask directions. They headed straight toward administration as if the building's layout had been handed to them in advance. Director Russell was in a meeting with risk management when her assistant entered, face pale. "Ma'am, the assistant said there are 3 generals here. They are asking for you." Russell's pen unstilled above her notepad. "Generals. Yes, ma'am. They are in the outer office. They say it is urgent." Russell stood smoothing her jacket with a quick motion that did not quite hide the tension. The lawyer rose with her without being asked. When Russell stepped into the outer office, the room seemed to shrink. Klein stood near the window hands behind his back, gaze fixed on the hospital grounds. Maddox faced the door, eyes sharp. Reed looked toward a framed hospital mission statement on the wall as if reading it for irony. Director Russell Klein said, turning. His voice was calm, polite, and carried authority like gravity. "I am General Harrison Klein. This is General Renee Maddox and General Thomas Reed. We are here regarding Staff Sergeant Ethan Rook." Russell gathered herself. "Sergeant Rook is recovering. The surgery was successful." Klein's gaze did not change. "Which surgery, Director?" Russell blinked. "The initial procedure was successful, and then there was a follow-up intervention." Maddox stepped slightly forward. "Follow-up is a gentle word." Reed's voice was quieter but cut clean. A metallic fragment was left near the cervical spine, Reed said. "We have been briefed." Russell's throat tightened. "By whom?" "By the patient," Maddox said. "By radiology. By the record. Pick one." Russell glanced toward her lawyer. He offered a tight, practiced smile. "Gentlemen, ma'am," he began, "we appreciate your concern. Patient care issues are handled through established hospital processes." Klein's eyes settled on him and the room chilled. "Established processes are why we are standing here," Klein said. "We want a full briefing. Not a summary. Not a softened version. The full account of events from arrival to second surgery. We also want to meet the nurse who ordered the scan." Russell's face held, but the color drained beneath the makeup. She tried to keep her voice level. "The care team includes many skilled professionals," she said. Maddox's expression did not soften. "We are not here to shake hands with a committee," she said. "We are here to meet the person who acted." Russell swallowed. She forced herself to nod. "Of course, let me coordinate." Klein's voice remained polite. "Coordinate quickly." As Russell moved toward her office, Reed's gaze shifted toward the hallway leading deeper into the hospital. He looked like a man listening for distant footsteps. Then he spoke, almost conversational. "Ethan is more than a name on your chart," Reed said. Russell paused. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "We treat all patients with the same care," she said. Klein's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. "Then you will have no trouble treating this one with the truth," he replied. Russell disappeared into her office, the door closing behind her. Maddox and Reed remained still, not sitting, not relaxing, as if the room belonged to their discipline now. Downstairs, the news traveled faster than any official announcement. A nurse in the elevator whispered to another. A tech at radiology checked the lobby cameras and saw the uniforms. A resident walked briskly past a group of staff and muttered, "3 generals," as if saying it aloud made it more believable. Emma heard it in the trauma corridor from a CNA who had no reason to invent something like that. "There are generals here," the CNA whispered, eyes wide. "Like real generals." Emma's mouth went dry. She kept walking, pushing a medication cart, pretending she had not heard. In Ethan's room, a nurse adjusted the collar and checked his pupils. Ethan's eyes remained clear. He looked toward the door as if expecting someone. When Emma entered, Ethan's gaze lifted. "They are here," he said quietly. Emma's grip tightened on the chart in her hand. "Who?" Ethan did not raise his voice. "General Klein, Maddox, Reed." Emma felt the name land in her chest like a weight. She had no context for it, only the sound of rank and the image of boots on polished floor. She kept her face steady. "They want to meet you," Ethan said. Emma's throat tightened. "I'm just a nurse." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "You were the only one in this building who acted like my life was yours to protect," he replied. He paused, then added in a softer tone, "They do not forget that." A knock sounded at the door. Emma turned. A hospital administrator stood there, posture, stiff eyes uneasy. "Nurse Wade," the administrator said, "Director Russell requests your presence in the administrative conference room." Emma's pulse jumped. She looked at Ethan. His gaze held hers steady. "Go," Ethan said. Emma nodded once. She set the chart down, smoothed her scrub top with a reflexive motion, and walked out of the room. The hallway to administration felt longer than usual. Every step sounded too loud. The hospital's normal noise seemed to fade as she approached the doors, as if the building itself was holding its breath. She stopped outside the conference room, hand hovering near the handle, then pushed it open and stepped inside. Emma stepped into the conference room and the air changed. It smelled like polished wood and printer ink, a different world than antiseptic and blood. The long table was crowded, but the room felt too quiet, as if even the building knew to keep its voice down. Director Cynthia Russell sat at the head, hands folded in front of a legal pad. Hospital counsel sat to her right, suit jacket, buttoned face arranged into professional calm. Dr. Henry Sloan sat opposite with a thick folder in front of him, the kind of folder that made the table look smaller. Dr. Mason Grant and Dr. Lila Kang sat near the far end, shoulders squared, expressions controlled. Between them and the door stood 3 figures in dress uniforms, not seated, not relaxed. General Harrison Klein turned first, eyes settling on Emma, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment she crossed the threshold. General Renee Maddox stood with her arms at her sides, gaze steady. General Thomas Reed watched Emma quietly, his attention sharp without being loud. Director Russell cleared her throat. "Nurse Emma Wade," she said. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Emma's feet felt heavy, but she moved to the chair nearest the door and sat with her hands in her lap. Her badge caught the light. She wished it did not. General Klein spoke without raising his voice. "Nurse Wade, you ordered the imaging that identified the retained fragment. Is that correct?" Emma looked from Klein to Sloan to Russell, then back. "Yes, sir." Grant's eyes flicked toward her, then away, as if he had already decided she did not deserve direct contact. Klein nodded once, slow. "Dr. Grant." Dr. Kang Klein said you told Director Russell you identified the fragment during post-operative review. Grant's jaw tightened. "We reviewed the imaging and determined further evaluation was warranted," he said. Sloane's pen moved across a sheet of paper, the sound small but cutting in the silence. Reed spoke softly. "The record does not reflect that sequence." Russell shifted in her chair. "We are here to clarify facts," she said. "This is an internal patient safety review." Maddox's gaze did not soften. Your internal review includes my soldier, she said. Facts are not flexible. Sloan opened his folder and slid several pages across the table. The paper stopped in front of Russell. Order history, phone logs, nursing documentation, radiology report, time-stamped CT results. Sloan's voice was calm, almost bored, as if the truth did not require drama. The imaging request was entered at 12:47 a.m. by Nurse Emma Wade. Radiology accepted after confirmation. Dr. Patel performed the read and identified a retained metallic fragment near C6. The patient returned to surgery after that finding. Russell's eyes moved across the timestamps. The lawyer leaned forward, lips pressed together. Grant stared at the paperwork for a long moment, then lifted his gaze to Sloan. Complex cases create unusual timelines, Grant said. There was urgency. Communication moves fast. Sloan did not blink. Communication is documented, he said. This is not ambiguous. Kang's voice was quiet, controlled. The patient is alive, she said. The outcome was corrected. Maddox stepped closer to the table. Corrected after a nurse insisted, she said. After your team closed the case. Grant's posture stiffened. I have been doing trauma surgery for 20 years, he said, voice tightening at the edges. I have saved more lives than I can count. Klein's expression remained calm. And how many were harmed, doctor? The question landed with no anger in it. That made it worse. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Sloan slid a second stack of papers forward, thicker than the first. 17 cases flagged for review. Similar patterns. Penetrating trauma, postoperative complications, external documentation of retained foreign material, nursing notes raising concerns that were dismissed. 3 deaths under review. Russell's face drained. The lawyer's hand moved to the edge of the table as if he needed something solid. Kang's eyes narrowed the first visible crack. Those cases were reviewed, she said. Complications are not always negligence. Sloan's tone did not change. That is why we pulled the full charts and conducted interviews. Nurses documented concerns repeatedly. The same phrases appear. Unexplained pain. Atypical vital response. Localized tenderness. Concerns raised. Concerns dismissed. This was not one miss. Grant's gaze snapped to Sloan. You are building a narrative. Sloan met his eyes. I am building a record. Reed finally looked at Grant fully. You claimed credit for what she did, Reed said, nodding slightly toward Emma. Why? Grant's mouth tightened. There was no claim, he said. There was a briefing. Details were condensed. Emma felt the heat rise in her face, but she kept her hand still. Her nails pressed into her own palm. Russell swallowed. Dr. Grant. Dr. Kang, she said, we need an explanation that aligns with the documentation. Grant looked at Russell with irritation. Do you want the explanation, or do you want the optics? The lawyer shifted quickly. Doctor, he said, keep your tone professional. Klein's voice stayed level. Here is what we want, he said. An accurate account. Full cooperation with the safety review. Immediate assurance that this nurse will not face retaliation for reporting a preventable error. The military will coordinate with the patient's advocate and our legal office. We will also be requesting a transfer plan should the patient choose military medical follow-up. Russell nodded too fast. Of course. We support transparency. Maddox's eyes flicked to Emma. Nurse Wade, did anyone discourage you from ordering the scan? Emma drew a slow breath. Radiology questioned the indication, she said. Dr. Grant confronted me in the corridor and told me I was overstepping. Grant's head turned sharply. I was maintaining proper chain of command. Emma met his gaze for the first time in the room. I documented my assessment and escalated concern for the patient, she said. The patient reacted repeatedly to palpation. There was an abnormal firmness beneath the dressing. I requested imaging. The CT confirmed a retained fragment. The room held still. Kang watched Emma with an expression that was hard to read, not friendly, not hostile, more like a person seeing a door they had not noticed before. Sloan closed his folder. "This review moves forward with board oversight," he said. "Effective immediately. Dr. Grant and Dr. Kang are suspended from trauma privileges pending final determination and reporting to the State Medical Board. Security will collect badges and access cards at the end of this meeting." Russell's head jerked slightly. "Henry," she said, "we have not discussed immediate suspension." Sloane's eyes stayed on hers. "We have discussed risk," he replied. "They cannot touch another case while this is open." Grant pushed his chair-back legs, scraping the floor. "This is outrageous," he said. Klein did not move, but the room seemed to shift around him. "Doctor," he said calmly, "you can be outraged later." Grant's hands clenched at his sides. Kang remained seated, face composed, but her eyes had gone distant, as if she were reading something on a wall no one else could see. Russell's voice came out thinner. "We will follow protocol," she said. Sloane nodded once. "Good." When the meeting ended, the generals did not speak to Grant and Kang again. They walked out with Russell and Sloane, leaving the surgeons behind for a moment with the weight of paper and silence. Emma stood slowly, unsure where to look. Reed paused near Emma's chair. "Nurse Wade," he said quietly. Emma turned. He nodded once, a small gesture that carried respect without performance. Then he walked out. In the hallway, Emma found her legs shaking. She forced herself to walk normally back towards the clinical units. The hospital felt different, as if it were holding its breath for a verdict. Staff passed her, glancing quickly, then looking away. A resident stood near an elevator and watched her with wide eyes, curiosity and fear mixed together. Later that afternoon, Emma returned to Ethan's room with a vitals cart. Ethan was awake, propped, slightly collar still in place. His color looked stronger. His eyes tracked her as she entered. "You got called upstairs," he said. Emma kept her voice steady. "Yes." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "They came." Emma nodded. Ethan exhaled slowly, the sound rough. "Good," he said. Emma checked his pulse, then his blood pressure. The cuff tightened and released. She listened to the quiet rhythm of his heart through the stethoscope, solid and present. Ethan watched her hands. "Did they try to bury it?" he asked. Emma met his eyes for a second, then looked back to the monitor. "There is a review," she said. Ethan's mouth tightened. "You have allies," he said, as if stating a fact. "You just did not know it yet." Emma finished the assessment and documented as usual. As she turned to leave, Ethan spoke again. "Wade." Emma paused. "You did right," Ethan said. Emma did not answer with anything that sounded like a speech. She simply nodded once and left the room. By evening, the hospital's internal communications lit up. A mandatory all-staff meeting was scheduled for the next morning in the auditorium. Attendance required. No details offered. That absence created its own noise. When Emma arrived the next day, the auditorium was already filling. Doctors in white coats sat beside nurses in scrubs, technicians in dark uniforms, administrators in business attire. The air buzzed with restrained conversation. Emma found a seat near the side, not wanting the center. Director Russell stepped onto the stage first. She looked tired, the kind of tired that makeup could not hide. She adjusted the microphone with careful hands and began. "We have conducted a patient safety review regarding a recent trauma case," she said. The review expanded into a wider audit of surgical oversight and documentation practices. Effective immediately, 2 physicians have been removed from clinical duties pending external review. New protocols are being implemented across trauma surgery, radiology, and nursing. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone whispered a name. Someone else shook their head slowly. Russell continued, voice steady but strained. "We will be notifying regulatory bodies as required. We will be contacting affected patients and families where appropriate. We will be revising our escalation pathways to ensure frontline clinical concerns can be raised without fear of retaliation." She paused, eyes moving across the crowd. Then she stepped slightly back as if making space. General Harrison Klein walked onto the stage. The room fell silent in a way Emma had never heard in a civilian building. Klein stood at the podium without touching it at first hands, resting lightly on the edges, his uniform immaculate metals catching the light when he shifted. "One of my soldiers is alive today," Klein said, "because one person in this hospital chose action over comfort." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Staff Sergeant Ethan Rook survived combat. Klein continued. He survived a gunshot wound. He nearly did not survive a preventable medical error. A hard hush held the room. Klein turned his head slightly, scanning the seats. "Nurse Emma Wade," he said, "please come to the stage." Emma's stomach dropped. Heat rushed to her face. For a moment she could not move. Then she stood legs unsteady and stepped into the aisle. Faces turned toward her. Some looked surprised. Some looked pleased. Some looked irritated. Emma kept her eyes on the steps up to the stage, one foot in front of the other, as if walking a narrow line. Klein met her at the top and offered his hand. Emma shook it. His grip was firm, respectful. This nurse recognized a danger. Others dismissed, Klein said. She documented her assessment. She requested imaging. She persisted when challenged. Her actions protected my soldier and initiated a review that uncovered wider risk. Emma stood beside him, hands at her sides, trying to keep her breathing calm. The auditorium felt enormous. The lights were bright. The silence was heavy. Klein reached into a folder and withdrew a certificate. He held it up for the room to see, then handed it to Emma. On behalf of the United States Army, Klein said, "I present this certificate of appreciation for courage and professional integrity in the protection of a soldier under your care." Applause began in scattered places, then grew. Some people stood. Others remained seated but clapped anyway. Emma held the certificate with both hands, feeling its weight, the paper thick, the ink crisp. She kept her face composed, but her throat tightened until it hurt. Klein nodded once to her, then faced the room again. "Take care of the people who speak up in your halls," he said, "and you will take better care of every patient who cannot speak for themselves." He stepped back and left the stage with Russell. Emma followed, guided gently by a staff member toward the side exit. She did not look at the crowd again until she was off stage, breath finally leaving her in a slow, trembling exhale. In the weeks that followed, the hospital changed in ways that were visible and ways that were not. New signs appeared in staff areas listing escalation contacts. Radiology instituted a second read process for trauma scans. A multidisciplinary safety board met weekly, and nursing had a formal seat at the table. An anonymous reporting portal went live with a number that could be tracked, not ignored. Emma was called into Russell's office one afternoon with the chief of surgery and the head of nursing present. The mood was different than before, less polished, more careful. "We are creating a new role," the chief of surgery said. Clinical Surgical Safety Lead. Nursing Authority. Direct escalation privileges for post-operative imaging concerns. Russell watched Emma closely. "We want you to fill it." Emma sat very still. She could feel the weight of her short time on the job, the way it could be used against her in any other room. She did not argue. She asked one question. "Will nurses be protected?" she said, "when they use it." Russell nodded once, yes. Emma accepted with a quiet nod, not smiling, not celebrating. She walked out and returned to her unit and kept doing her work. A month later, a glass case appeared in the main lobby near the entrance. Inside were letters, copies sealed behind panels, names, redacted words left intact. There was a plaque beneath them with simple engraved text that did not try to make the pane pretty. Emma passed it on her way in one morning and stopped without meaning to. She read a letter from a daughter describing a father who never came home. Another from a spouse who had lived with unanswered questions. Another that simply said thank you for telling the truth. The letters were not neat. They were raw and they were real. Emma stood there until the lobby grew crowded around her. Then she moved on. One afternoon, months later, Ethan Rook returned to the hospital without a collar, without a gown, wearing a pressed uniform. He walked slowly not because he had to, but because he had learned the value of not rushing a body that had been close to breaking. He found Emma's office, knocked once, and stepped in when she called out. Emma looked up from a stack of reports. Ethan held a paper cup in one hand and a small bouquet of simple flowers in the other. "You still drink it black," he said. Emma stared at the coffee, then at him, and felt something loosen in her chest. "Yes," she said. Ethan set the coffee down, then placed the flowers in a glass of water he found on the counter, as if the room had always needed them. He glanced at the folder on her desk, labeled with a plain word, "Why?" Emma noticed his gaze. She did not cover it. She did not need to. Ethan sat across from her, posture relaxed, but eyes steady. "You look like someone who does not sleep," he said. Emma's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I sleep enough," she replied. Ethan nodded toward the window where the hospital grounds stretched green and ordinary under the sun. "They know your name now," he said. Emma looked at the reports, then at the door, then back at Ethan. The hospital hummed outside her walls, full of people moving fast, full of decisions, full of charts waiting for signatures. Emma lifted the coffee cup and took a sip. The bitterness grounded her. Then she set it down and opened the top report pen in hand, as the monitor sound from a nearby room pulsed steadily through the hall.